Hey, folks, welcome to the Battles of the First World War podcast. Joining us today is Antony J. Bell, here to discuss his novel, A Penny a Shell. Antony J. Bell is a historical fiction author and former member of the British Armed Forces, whose work is rooted in the overlooked stories of the First World War. Raised in a working-class Yorkshire family, he brings both lived experience and academic insight to his storytelling, holding a history degree from the Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. Hope I pronounced that correctly.
Almost.
How was it pronounced?
Heriot-Watt.
Harry. Oh,
yeah. Sorry, I've probably spelt it wrong. I normally do.
I get kudos on French pronunciation. It's usually the English names that I wind up screwing up.
Well, you're better than me with French pronunciation then. As an English person, I don't even try.
Antony's debut novel, A Penny a Shell, is a personal tribute to his great-grandmother, one of the 35 women killed in the 1916 Barnbow munitions factory explosion. Combining meticulous research with deep emotional connection, Antony aims to honor the courage, sacrifice, and fierce solidarity of the women on the World War I home front, voices long silenced by history. He lives in Yorkshire with his family and continues to uncover the human stories buried within the Great War. Antony, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
You're very welcome, and thank you very much for having me. It's a real honor. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So we'll start off. This question is even dumber now, but I'm going to go ahead and just roll with it. So first off, thank you for doing your bit for your country. And so now that we've established that you were in the Royal Air Force and not the Army, because, folks, this is why you don't give things a man's glance. You need to actually read emails. So, Antony, what did you do in the Royal Air Force? And, if it wasn't tanks, why not tanks?
It is a good question. I mean, why not tanks? But I was on tankers. I was an air load master on tankers. That was basically my final position in the Royal Air Force. I was an air load master on tankers.
Okay.
And so doing air-to-air refueling and that kind of thing, all the good things, all the good stuff on it sounds very glamorous, but there was it was a lot of tea making on board and things like that. So but it was fun. It was 16 years of good fun. At most of the time. The time.
Yes. Wow. Air-to-air refueling. Oh my God. That I'm sure that to you it's probably like mundane, as mundane as like filling up your own car or anything. But that just seems incredibly complex and intricate.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly had its moments, and it's as we. As I look back, being a petrol pump attendant in the sky was, I'd like to say it had its moments, but it was a good job at the time, and but I left that somewhat a long time ago now. It feels, in fact, I've been out of the Air Force now longer than I was in the Air Force, so so I left in 2006. So joining up in 1990. In 2006, I left, and then I've now been out of the Air Force longer than I was in. But in fact, when I joined up in 1990, and if somebody had told me then that in 2026 I would be having a best friend who was a Russian. Who used to be part of the Russian army, I would have, not believed them. But here we are, this amount of time later, so things have changed quite a substantial amount.
Yeah. So to move into your novel, A Penny a Shell, as we were talking here before we record, I was really moved by it, and I haven't forgotten. So what I said to Antony before, folks, was that I was very moved by his novel, and it was really, I'm I've been aware, of course, of the civilian home fronts and everything, but I have to admit that I haven't really dug too deep into them, and I've never really considered them as much as your book obviously does. So, you know, typically thinking about World War One, you think about the Tommies and the Poilus and the Germans in the trenches suffering, but like
Mm.
the folks back home were suffering as well in their own way. And your book really brought that to life for me, and I really walked away feeling it. And you have some really moving lines in your novel, like this one. Quote, the city's silence, its shared grief, the quiet wait for something, anything, became its kind of mourning. End quote. Anthony, how long have you been writing, and what drives you to write? Because that is a very powerful sentence amongst others in your novel.
Thank you. I very much appreciate it. I've been writing for a long time, really, telling stories, and we all, being ex-fan forces yourself, we know that we have this hurry up and wait culture,
Mhm.
where we then sit around, pull up a sandbag and we all sit there around telling stories. So we all have that sort of culture between us. And then, and we sit there and we tell each other stories. But then when I had my child, when my son was born, Alex, and a few years in, I was telling him stories, and then I started writing a few down. And I wrote a few short stories, and then sent them off, and had some good success with them. And then I actually wrote this novel. This must have been about the 2007 time, and I wrote the first version of this novel. But it was really about as I started researching my family history and things, I wrote this first version of this novel, and but it was a real long-winded, from 1750s right the way through to today, as if I was writing War and Peace. And this is actually just a small part of that full thing that I wrote initially. And then when COVID came around, life happens. And then when COVID came around, started doing more research and deeper research into my family tree. My grandfather, you see, he always told us that my grandfather is Cecil in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And that's his real name. His name was Cecil, and a very interesting story that he had is through his life. But and he told us that actually his mother was killed on a hospital ship in the North Sea during the Battle of Jutland. And so really, when I started doing that research and researching her, I could never find anything on her dying at the Battle of Jutland.
Right.
And it always confused me. And I was like, well, okay, well, what actually happened?
Mm-hmm.
So really just finding through her name, and so I looked for the Queen Alexander nursing register and all that type of stuff for the Imperial War Museum. Not a name found. But then the name Sarah Ann Jennings, which was my great grandmother's name, kept popping up. But it was always for this munitions worker who died at Barnbow. And so I started researching that, and that is exactly who she was. But my grandfather would never said that. He always maintained it was this, naval service dying in the Battle of Jutland. So anyway, it was just a secret maintained as far as he was concerned. Which he was sworn to secrecy during that period, and that secret was maintained right up until his death into the 70s. So yes, it was a very difficult situation for us to research that part. But as you know, reading the Penny Shell, we got there in the end.
Yeah. So here's another another line from your book. Hidden behind fences, hedgerows, and a wall of official silence, Barnbow wasn't shown on any public map, unlike a real town. So just for the greater audience out there, can you tell us what happened on December 5th, 1916, at National Filling Factory Number 1?
Yeah. So Barnbow was one of the largest factories. It didn't make the TNT there, but it's got it delivered, and then they also didn't make the shells there per se. They, like actually forging the shells or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Again, all of this was then delivered to the factory, so it was quite a. It was the filling factory, if you will. So they then mixed TNT and created an amatol mix,
Okay.
which they then filled the shelves with, and then once it started to cool, they pushed that down. And so basically in room 42 or shed 42, depending on what research you do and where you read it, they were doing this exact dangerous part of the job, which was the cap filling part of the job, pushing down the TNT once it had dried, the amatol once it had dried, and then they put the cap of the shell on. And they put the fuse in and everything, and then put the cap on. And once they were putting the cap on, they believe it was at the capping machine where it put it on. There was an explosion. The explosion ripped right through the room, killing 35 women. Most of them died instantaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who was any close to the explosion died instantaneously, and then there was a number of women who were taken to hospital and then subsequently died. The one that was the latest one was a young lady. She died about 2 years after from shock, from her injuries, and then also from shock, they believe, and never ever got over it. And as you could imagine. So yeah, there was once they don't really know, and then there was an inquiry, and they never ever really said what the actual cause was. But if you read the book, there's a number of factors that it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I it's not my job to speculate on what the actual cause was. But doing that research and listening to, we're very lucky in the UK because we have the Imperial War Museum and all the records that we have. So and very lucky that in the 1970s, the Imperial War Museum they did a load of recordings of these lovely women who worked at Barnbow or worked at Silvertown or worked at Chilwell and places like that. They took these recordings and they recorded these people to make sure that they had their stories and kept them. And then I was able to use that along with everything else that I'd found to curate this story and put this story together. It's hard to it's hard to say that what could have been the cause, but the bonus could have been the cause, or pressure, or just human error, and but really they never. I guess they didn't. I guess they decided they didn't want to say exactly what had happened and,
Okay.
any blame anybody per se. And that's also not my job in this book. It's not about blame or anything like that. It's more about, what could have gone wrong and the pressures that these women were under.
Of course, you already mentioned you have a very personal connection to the story of the explosion that killed the Barnbow Lasses, as they're called, in a memorial located in Leeds. So it seems like you first heard of the story through your grandfather Cecil, who talked about she died in the Battle of Jutland. Obviously, that's not correct. But aside from that, like, how well does your family remember her today? And
Well, they didn't. My mother, she was adamant. I mean, she even denied, oh no, this isn't her, because her father had just told her that exact story about the Battle of Jutland. So they didn't. Nobody really did. We didn't even know there was a memorial for her. there is a separate memorial just for Sarah Ann Jennings in
Oh, okay.
in a small in her village called Wartall. So Wartall itself was in there in the church. I think I can't remember the name of the church. I visited actually last year, St Mary's, I think. But there was there's a memorial just for her in that church, and we didn't know. Otherwise I would have been there much earlier, and and laying a poppy and things like this at that time. But I didn't know, and I also, we didn't know about the memorial at Leeds because they had a big ceremony and families turned up and things like this. But we didn't because we didn't know.
Right.
And anyway, yeah. So no, he kept that secret from my mother, and she denied it, and she wouldn't accept it initially until we found a photo and of my great grandmother, and then it looks exactly. I aren't joking you. It's like my sister's gone back in time.
Really?
Yeah. My eldest sister Jackie. It looks like she's dressed up in 1914 gear and then gone all the way back. But yeah, she looks it's like her twin. I aren't joking. Yeah.
Really?
And then so we found this picture, and there she is in this group with at the Barnbow factory. And so yeah, it was so my mother took a bit of time, but she got there in the end.
Yeah, you're talking decades. This was the
Yeah.
story for her, and for her to have to like suddenly, everything you thought up to this point was wrong, like
Yeah. My mum likes the book, My mum likes the book, but then again, she's biased. So, people are, aren't they, when it's your brothers and sisters and mums and stuff. So yeah.
Did the Barnbow explosion create your interest in the First World War, or were you already interested before you learned of it? And you talk about overlooked stories that interest you.
Yeah.
Do you have some other ones as well?
Yeah. I'm just finishing one now, which is something that's close to my heart as well. But yeah, when I was at uni, we have what's called Freshers Week, which is basically when you first get there,
Mm-hmm.
and then you sign up to clubs and things like this. And I signed up to the World War One club, and I was the only one. It was me and the lecturer who run the club. There was just me and him, and so actually we had a real good time, and we sat and I learned about loads and loads of stuff, and then then we went on a small visit to France and Belgium and during one summer, and so I had a real good time doing it. But and so really I had the interest in the First World War for quite some time. Knowing that my grandfather had also gone through the First World War, and thinking that my great grandmother had died during the First World War
Right.
in a whole different circumstance. So it was that those were very, very interesting to me. It made sense because all of my both my grandfathers were in the Royal Navy.
Okay.
I had an uncle in the Royal Navy, and we had an uncle actually in the Scots Guards. But there you go. But yeah, we had most of my family had all been in the Navy up until that point, and actually I was primed to join the Royal Navy when I first left school. Really, I wasn't going to go to university or anything. I was just going to go and join the Royal Navy and do it that way. Because it was a family thing. The men had been in the Royal Navy up until that point. So but a First World War interest had always really been there. For me anyway. I always I grew up not so much watching First World War movies actually, because there's not that many, is there, to be fair.
Right.
But I always watched World War II movies. Britain did some great World War II movies for the Navy, you know, in the 50s and 60s. So watching those, so it was something I always sort of wanted to do. But and being a lover of history as well. I don't know if I call myself a historian as such, but I certainly am a lover of history. Then being a lover of history also helped me with, falling in love with stories of World War One.
Oh,
what was the second part of that question?
Yeah,
I rambled on too long.
You answered it before, so it was like, what other overlooked stories interest you? You had one near to your heart. So that's super cool. So hopefully we'll read of that in the future. So
yeah, well, it's like I say, it's almost done, and it's something that's really close to my heart as well, and something you might know, and something other people might know, which is the Scarborough bombardment of 1914.
Oh, December.
Yeah.
Okay.
December 16th, and I'm writing about one particular person, and him going through that period as well. So
Amazing.
It's something I grew up with. It's something because we used to holiday in Scarborough, and so it's something I grew up with as I went to Scarborough for holidays and things. And so I always knew about, and so I just wanted to make sure that everybody else in the world knows about it. Everybody else in the world. As if. But anyway, I digress.
No, that's awesome. That's fantastic. All right. So here, I've got another quote here. So, quote, her stomach turned, the psalm. Though the worst of the fighting had passed, the name remained a raw wound. Every village had lost someone, a husband, a brother, a son. She thought of Cecil, grateful he was in the Navy and not the Army. The headlines blurred. Another town, another front. More men gone. More women waiting. End quote. Like I said earlier, your book to me really captured the plight of the civilians back home during the First World War. Brought to light the suffering. That the suffering was not just in the trenches. And though your work is fiction, it feels grounded in truth. So the women in the munitions factories struggling to make ends meet, the shattering grief of the deaths of so many young men, women being slowly poisoned by TNT, and the relentless drive to make shells for the insatiable war in France. What research did you conduct in order to be able to portray this time the way you did, Anthony?
People often ask, actually, why didn't you just write a non-fiction book about this? Well, the answer to that question is I did think about it, and but I decided to make it fiction because I couldn't put across, like you say, getting people to not just because I could tell somebody this is what it was like in 1916. This is what these women were put under. I could tell them, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to make people feel it. I wanted to make people feel that it was the coldest winter on record in the UK. I wanted to make people think, well, okay, yes, they got £3 a week, which was in them days for women was a fortune. It was big money. It was good money, and but the cost of living was so high. Right. We talk about the cost of living now, but the cost of living then, income tax was 25% for somebody in their wage bracket. So it was it wasn't none of that was easy, and bread and milk and necessities were shooting through the roof, and of course things were on the black market, and then some and rationing was just coming in as well in 1916. So it's difficult for them in those senses. So yes, they got paid a lot of money, but it was too difficult. I wanted people to feel that, and feel the pressure that these people were under. So, that's why that was done that way. And as I did move forward with that as I started writing it in the fiction, to make people feel it. It was just it felt real to me as I wrote it, and I wanted to make sure that people also felt it was real, because the takeaway on it is, it is the pressures that these women were under. So
Yeah. And I
missed
can
any part of that question.
yeah, I think we got it all. It's also like, we read about the millions of shells fired, on the Western
Oh
Front.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
well, they, those have to be made, and of course, like, I'm sure the demand was always there as long as the war was going on, and I can imagine, women and any men working in these factories, like, being put under that pressure to, like produce, like, it's never enough. It's never enough. We
Yeah,
need more
the
shells.
1915 shell shortage from the UK, which George Lloyd was, he was famously got worked up over quite a substantial amount, because the army, the British Army, was running out of. I mean, actually the British Army is running out of shells now, but the British Army was running out of shells then during a war, and and so the pressure to get shells moved, to get it all moving again, was quite high as well. So hence the bonus scheme and things like this.
Yeah, 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 and also feeling the cold of the winter, and the fact that
Mm.
these women and their families, like, didn't always have a whole lot of food, for the
No,
kids
that's
and
right.
everything. That's it definitely, it's the word Dickensian comes to mind, but it's like,
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's like that. Like, I could see it. I could really feel it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want, when I was writing it, I wasn't thinking, oh, let's do a new Oliver Twist. It was,
No, no.
but the thing is, you're not the first person to mention Charles Dickens, but which is, I don't know, I mean, a compliment and everything, and it's, but I really wish it was anywhere near that, but but it really was. If you look at the mining towns of Yorkshire during that period of time, where a lot of the men were, they were all off in the sappers, the Royal Engineers,
Hmm.
to dig tunnels in France. So, there were struggles for who was left, and there were struggles for their families, and and things like this. So, I'm trying to capture it all, which is probably, I don't know if that's the wrong or the right thing to have done, but I tried to capture everything that I felt would have led to a pressure for these women, as they did their work, and that's what I tried to do in the novel, is try and capture that, so people could really feel what it was like during that period of time, and then we can close the book and step away, and hopefully then, when Remembrance Sunday, or Veterans Day as it is for you guys,
Hmm.
we've got a lot to think about now, on a Remembrance Sunday or a Veterans Day. We've got a lot to think about, but then hopefully then just one small second of that remembering is also this.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. Well said. Thank you. Um, the facts of the Barnbow explosion. Did they ever come to light? And when, if so, or was it always kind of held, covered up, or not
Yeah,
covered up, but you know, not made very public?
yeah. The inquiry was a sham, really.
Really? Okay.
It was, yeah. So having reading, going deep dive into that research of the inquiry and everything, it was a sham. It was uh, it's a cliche, if you will. It was just an absolute sham, and and didn't tell anybody anything that they didn't already know, and so really putting the pieces together, like from um, the Imperial War Museum, or
Hmm.
there's an amazing book, non-fiction, by you've got me because I can't remember her name right this very moment in time. But the name of the book is "On Her Their Lives Depend,"
On
and
her.
it's an amazing book about women workers during World War One, and it's non-fiction. And I can't remember the amazing author's name. She was I think she's an Australian lady, and a really amazing book. And so that was also great for research and things. But when you do the research and you look at the inquiry, it was but that took some digging to get the information from that inquiry as well. So that took a real lot of digging. It was buried deep, and nobody really had tried to unearth it. And but it was there, and it really was. It was. Yeah, it was a sham. It was just, oh yeah, there was an explosion. Yes, these women died. But there was no real information as to why. Yeah, so there
Now,
you go.
in your book, without giving too much away, the room 42 is up and running very, very quickly after the explosion. Is that historically accurate? And I could see that. Is it really?
Yeah.
Just we have to keep
there's
moving.
pictures out there. There's actually pictures out there, but which are actually not which are incorrect.
Okay.
There's a picture of and it says it's room 42 at Barnbow, but it's not. It's actually the Chilwell factory. But the room 42 at Barnbow, because which was a good thing, because not all the shell filling rooms were connected, which was good.
Okay.
They weren't all connected. They were connected via a clean way, which was just a walkway, and then the individual sheds from there. And so shed 42 was up and running by the next morning. It exploded it exploded 10 p.m., 10:27 p.m. And then by the next morning, it was pretty much ready to go.
My God. Wow.
Yeah. Nothing stopped. And, it was the newspaper article which basically said that, it says, I can't remember the actual quote, but they say, minimal disruption to shell filling at the Barnbow. At the shell filling factory. That's all it says in the paper. There was minimal disruption, is all it says. It didn't say, and 35 women lost their lives. It didn't say, this terrible tragedy or anything like that. It just said there was minimal disruption.
Wow.
And then but it was back up and running by the next morning, and the day shift arrived, and they was able to get to work.
Man,
and they did. People. Even if you and this was the resilience of these people, really.
Yes.
In the night shift, yes, they replaced obviously quite a substantial amount of women for the night shift, but they all turned back up to work. The ones that could turned back up to work, and they believed at the time, it was just about carrying on and getting things done, because they all had their men, husbands, brothers, and whatever, fathers and such. They was all away, and they were all fighting, and they needed these shells. So, and Britain needed them. So, I don't want to stick patriotism in there, but it's true that they did that out of patriotism, as well as the wages, the required wages, because they wouldn't have got paid if they didn't go. So, all the women, they all turned back up as well. Not just was the factory ready to go, it was, these women, as much as they could, were back at work, ready to do this dangerous job yet again, and fingers crossed everything went all right.
Yeah. The women who, the 35 women killed, they were all listed as having died in accidents. Is that
accidents? That's right. Yeah.
As well. Okay. Yeah. Very, very vague.
Yeah. The cloak of secrecy was wrapped around them quite tightly. So newspapers, if they were mentioned in newspapers at all, if there was mentioned at all in the newspaper, then it just said that they died in an accident.
Man.
Mm.
Wow. And I can't believe the facts like just were never brought to light. Like
Yeah, I
the
know,
like
isn't it?
as you say, the cloak of secrecy stayed. Wow, wow.
Yeah, I don't know if we would. I don't know if you think of today and you think of the possibilities of tomorrow, and would we do the same now? Would that be the same? Would people be able to take that where we didn't say anything? I don't know. You know, it, maybe we would. Because it's not about the people. It's also about the time, isn't it? It's like that time. People understood that they needed that secrecy. I guess. And
Right.
would we do that today? Well, possibly, because if my mother was filling, I mean, she's 70 odd, so probably not. But if my sisters were filling filling shells in a factory, if we was having a war against Moscow and they were filling shells or whatever you're doing, whatever that needs to be done,
Hmm.
and then it exploded, it's just the times, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than the individuals.
Right.
So, I mean, because people often say now, don't they? That was the greatest generation, a greatest lost generation, uh, and and we'd never see the likes again. But as I do, uh, I've seen 18-year-old boys in, I've dropped them off, and watched them march off into war and kick through doors and do whatever they need to do.
Yep.
And they're 18, and standing up, and there they are, Whereas, I think a lot of people today, if the worst came to the worst and we had to stand up again, I think any generation actually would still do it. I still think today, people often, like I said, people often say, would this generation do that? Yes, I believe they would. I do. I just think it's whatever's happening to them at the time, rather than you know, uh, rather than the generation as such. I think that this generation would stand up just as hard, just as well as the past two times we've had to do it. You
Yeah.
know.
Interesting. Actually at a local gas station right here in my hometown. The folks who own it inside, they have this little uh, framed photograph in it, and it says, I'm gonna have to paraphrase, but it's like folks sometimes ask me like, I don't know how you do it, and my response is usually, I wasn't given a choice.
Mm,
And it's I think it's like you say, like if our generation suddenly had to do something very difficult, like a World War I or World War II, there would probably be some growing pains and some groaning and and
mm.
moaning, but yeah, we would just have to like roll up our sleeves and get to it, and then we
Yeah, I
would
think
say
so. I
that's
think,
this is what the time calls for now.
yeah. I mean, not so much. I mean, World War I wasn't one where we had our, well, I think the government and everything, especially in Britain, I think they framed it as our lifestyle and our lives were at, in Britain were at risk. But I don't know if that was the case really. But certainly in World War II, it was the case.
Hmm.
Two different wars, obviously, and when we were fighting, when we started fighting the Germans in 1939, it was, the situation was very much perilous and very very different. And I think I am saying that would be the case against Russia right now, but that certainly would be more like World War II than it would be World War I, where we barged in because of treaties.
Hmm.
A mess of treaties all over the place. Um, I think it'd be much more like World War II. Yes, Poland gets invaded and then we all spring into action. I think that's very much the same. So, but, if, I mean, Russia does right now threaten our way of life. It does. And I hate to bring politics into this type of thing, but, we see parallels, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
uh, you know,
Absolutely.
and, 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 and this is, and my book is more about, as much as we talk about the women, it's more about the working class than anything, because it's the working class are the ones that get put upon the most. It's the upper classes that are making all of those decisions, which really affect because they really affect the working lives, and we see this right the way across history. If we look at even 2008 and the financial crisis, and it's the working class, the people who pay the taxes, the people who are at the bottom end, who end up suffering the most because of the decisions that were made.
Right.
And we carry on doing the same thing because they know that the great unwashed, the huddled masses, they're there to pick up the bits, and to be the fighters on the line, no matter the situation, whether it be the financial cruelties or the or wars. And so that is a big theme through the book, if you will, is the working class and how the working class are put upon.
Oh, amazing. Well, my last question here is, talking about any other projects that you're working on. We know about the Scarborough project here. So that's your main focus right now, or
yeah.
Cool.
I'm very lucky to be semi-retired.
Good for you. Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, you know what it's like. But anyway, I decided to write down that story of Scarborough and the Scarborough bombardment. It's called When War Came to Town, and it's about Georgie Harlan Taylor, who was the Boy Scout that was killed with the final shell of the bombardment on the 16th of December 1914. Where 2 German destroyers were pulled off the coast of Scarborough, and then they fired over 500 shells into a small seaside town. It talks about, it's a fictional story about George, because George really went out just to go and find to go and buy a newspaper, because he'd been mentioned in the newspaper, and he wanted to show his friends. But so I changed the story, and he's now called Georgie Taylor. And really he wants to do what's called something that counts. He wants to be, he can't join up because he's 14, but he wants to do something that counts for himself, his brother, and for his town. And so that's basically what the premise of the story is. The follow on to that is about a VAD nurse, voluntary aid detachment nurse, who's also it's a follow up. Basically, she is in the first book, and the follow up is her going to France to try and help soldiers as well. So but that's just starting, and the research for the VAD is all ongoing, which is great. But so I want to stick with the World War One and lesser known stories about World War One, because, and especially the home front. But I'm not overly nailed to the home front, if you will. I will just keep that going, and hopefully a couple more people than just my friends and family buy the books, and which is, because that's you get to a certain amount where you run out of friends and family who will buy the book and not going to buy it a third time.
Yeah.
I'm not winning any Pulitzer prizes, but it's nice when you get somebody that you don't know buys it and then they review it. It's nice. And it's a great feeling. And
Yes.
and I just like to share these stories of Yorkshire that maybe not a lot of people know about, apart from World War One historians. If a lot of people know about Chilwell, because Chilwell was a massive, it was the biggest sort of munitions factory explosion. And Chilwell is in sort of Nottinghamshire, and that was the biggest explosion. So a lot of people know about that one, and that was towards the end of the war, I think 1918. but the big one everybody tends to talk about, really, because it was in the centre of London, and that was Silvertown.
Okay.
Although Silvertown didn't fill shells as such, they actually made the TNT.
Okay.
They purified the TNT in the Silvertown factory. And the reason why a lot of people know about Silvertown, and about 74 people died in Silvertown. And that was about a month after Barnbow. It was 1 month after. It was in January. And so quite a number of people died in Silvertown. But the thing was, it was in the middle of the East End, surrounded by houses.
Oh,
In a residential area. It was a stupid place to put a TNT factory, but there you go, needs must. And so it was January 1915. So a lot of people know about that one because because it was London, and people only think Britain's London, don't they? So
right.
as Northerners, we get forgot about. And so I wanted to. So the highlight of Barnbow was for me was also paramount in this book.
Oh, excellent. Antony, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this afternoon. And folks, there will be a link so that you can purchase A Penny a Shell, written by Antony J. Bell. We'll have links right in the episode notes so that you can just click right on it and buy it there and read it, folks. It's a really good book. Like I said, it really captures the feelings of that time. Yeah, Antony, door is always open for your next stories. Can't wait to read them. Can't wait to discuss them further here. So thank you so much for reaching out.
Man, you're really welcome, and it was a real enjoyable hour, wasn't it? So
yeah, almost.
I'm sorry if I've talked too much. We talk a bit too much in Yorkshire.
No, we love the details here. So I do.
I hope you can all understand my my accent as well. I'm not as my Yorkshire accent isn't as deep as it used to be, if you can believe that. So,
well, here in the U.S., I've got a Boston accent, so it's
that's one of the nicest accents in the U.S., right?
Thank you.